The confetti rained down, sticking to my tear-streaked face like mocking reminders of a joy that was never meant to be. The music, once a vibrant anthem of our future, now sounded like a twisted dirge. He stood there, tall and imposing, the very picture of a man who had just crushed another human being, and hadn't an ounce of regret on his face. He had just ended our wedding ceremony, in front of everyone we knew and loved. I wanted to scream, to lash out, to make him feel even a fraction of the devastation that was currently consuming me, but I couldn't. If you would protect your sister with your life, subscribe now. It had all started so perfectly, hadn't it? Mark and I met in college, a whirlwind of shared classes, late-night study sessions fueled by lukewarm coffee, and stolen kisses under the sprawling oak tree in the quad. He was everything I thought I wanted, intelligent, ambitious, and devastatingly charming. He had this way of looking at me, like I was the only person in the room, the only person who mattered. Hannah, fell hard, and I fell fast. Our relationship progressed at warp speed, fueled by what I genuinely believed was a once-in-a-lifetime connection. He met my family, charmed them all, and quickly became an integral part of our lives. My parents adored him, my brother saw him as the cool older brother he never had, and even my usually stoic grandmother cracked a smile whenever he was around. He was perfect, or so I thought. The proposal was straight out of a movie, a romantic dinner, a secluded beach, and a ring that sparkled under the moonlight. Of course, I said yes. How could I not? The wedding planning began almost immediately. I envisioned a fairy tale wedding, a celebration of our love surrounded by our closest friends and family. My mother poured her heart and soul into the preparations, spending countless hours poring over flower arrangements, cake designs, and seating charts. I tried to involve Mark as much as possible, but he always seemed preoccupied, brushing off my suggestions with a vague "whatever you want, honey," or "you have great taste, just handle it." Looking back, the red flags were there, waving frantically in the wind, but I was too blinded by love, or perhaps naivete, to see them. The weeks leading up to the wedding were a blur of dress fittings, vendor meetings, and last-minute panics. Mark became increasingly distant, his phone constantly buzzing with messages, his eyes darting nervously whenever I entered the room. I tried to talk to him about it, to understand what was going on, but he would just dismiss my concerns, telling me I was being paranoid and that he was just stressed about work. I wanted to believe him, I truly did, but a gnawing feeling of unease began to creep into my heart. The morning of the wedding dawned bright and sunny, a picture-perfect day that only served to amplify the storm brewing inside me. As I sat in the bridal suite, getting my hair and makeup done, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was terribly wrong. My bridesmaids tried to reassure me, telling me it was just pre-wedding jitters, but their words rang hollow. Walking down the aisle, I focused on Mark, his handsome face a beacon in the sea of smiling guests. But as I drew closer, I noticed something was off. His jaw was clenched, his eyes filled with a strange mixture of fear and defiance. He didn't look like a man about to marry the love of his life, he looked like a man about to face a firing squad. The vows began, the familiar words echoing through the stunned silence of the church. He looked directly into my eyes, a cold, calculating stare that sent a shiver down my spine. "I cannot do this." The words hung in the air, heavy and suffocating. The silence was broken only by my ragged breathing and the gasps of the guests. He continued, his voice devoid of any emotion, explaining how he couldn't marry me, that he didn't love me, and that he never had. The person I trusted most was one of them. The world tilted on its axis, the ornate church spinning into a kaleidoscope of horrified faces and muted whispers. My carefully constructed reality shattered into a million pieces, each one a tiny shard of pain embedding itself deep within my soul. I don't remember much of what happened after that, just a blur of well-meaning but ultimately useless platitudes, awkward hugs, and the burning shame of being the center of attention for all the wrong reasons. My mother, bless her heart, tried to shield me from the stares, her face a mask of bewildered anger. My father, usually a man of stoic composure, looked utterly lost, his eyes searching for answers in a situation that defied all logic. My brother, ever the protector, stood guard, his fists clenched, ready to unleash his fury on anyone who dared to utter a disrespectful word. I was numb, a hollow shell of the person I had been just moments before. The dress, once a symbol of hope and dreams, now felt like a suffocating shroud, trapping me in a nightmare I couldn't escape. They broke me. I stayed silent. Because the plan had begun. The days that followed were a torturous cycle of disbelief, grief, and a bone-crushing emptiness. I couldn't eat, I couldn't sleep, and I certainly couldn't comprehend how the man I thought I knew, the man I had pledged to spend my life with, could inflict such devastating pain with such calculated cruelty. Sleepless nights were spent replaying every moment of our relationship, searching for clues I had missed, for signs of the betrayal that had been brewing beneath the surface. Was it all a lie? Had he ever truly loved me, or was I just a pawn in some twisted game I didn't understand? The questions swirled in my mind, relentless and unforgiving, offering no solace, no answers, only the cold, hard truth that my heart had been shattered beyond repair. I tried to talk to Mark, to understand his reasons, to salvage some semblance of closure from the wreckage of our relationship. I called him, I texted him, I even drove to his apartment, desperate for some explanation, some sign of remorse. But he refused to speak to me, his only response a curt text message, "It's over. Leave me alone." The finality of those words hit me like a physical blow, driving the knife of betrayal even deeper into my already wounded heart. Humiliation became my constant companion. Everywhere I went, I could feel the weight of people's gazes, the whispers that followed me like a shadow. Friends and acquaintances, unsure of how to react, offered awkward condolences, their words laced with pity and a thinly veiled curiosity. I became a pariah, the girl who had been publicly jilted at the altar, a cautionary tale whispered in hushed tones at social gatherings. The wedding vendors, understandably frustrated by the sudden cancellation, demanded payment for their services, adding another layer of financial strain to my already overwhelming emotional burden. My parents, bless their hearts, stepped in to cover the costs, but I couldn't shake the feeling of being a failure, a disappointment to everyone who had invested their time, energy, and money into our ill-fated union. The weight of it all was crushing, threatening to suffocate me under the sheer magnitude of the injustice. I said nothing. They thought I was done. But I was counting every second. In the depths of my despair, I found myself drawn to the support of my sister, Sarah. She had always been my rock, my confidant, my unwavering champion. She listened patiently as I poured out my heart, offering words of comfort and encouragement, reminding me of my strength and resilience. But beneath her gentle demeanor, I could sense a simmering rage, a fierce protectiveness that mirrored my own brother's. Sarah, unlike the others, didn't offer empty platitudes or try to minimize my pain. She acknowledged the depth of my suffering, validated my anger, and assured me that I deserved better. It was Sarah who first planted the seed of revenge in my mind, not with explicit words or suggestions, but with a knowing look and a simple statement: "He can't get away with this, Hannah. You deserve justice." The idea took root, slowly but surely, germinating in the fertile ground of my wounded pride and simmering resentment. I had always been a peacekeeper, a people-pleaser, someone who avoided conflict at all costs. But the betrayal had changed me, stripping away my naivete and replacing it with a steely resolve. The desire for revenge wasn't about inflicting pain on Mark, although that was certainly a tempting prospect. It was about reclaiming my power, about refusing to be a victim, about showing him and everyone else that I was not someone to be trifled with. It was about healing the deep wounds that had been inflicted upon my soul, not by forgiving and forgetting, but by confronting the injustice head-on and emerging stronger, wiser, and more resilient than ever before. The person I trusted most was one of them. The abyss is a dark and lonely place. I know, because I lived there. Days bled into weeks, each one a carbon copy of the last, waking up with a knot of dread in my stomach, forcing down a few bites of food, staring blankly at the television, and then retreating back into the false comfort of sleep, only to repeat the cycle again the next day. I shut myself off from the world, ignoring phone calls, avoiding social gatherings, and letting my apartment descend into a state of disarray that mirrored the chaos within my own mind. The once vibrant space, filled with carefully chosen furniture and cherished mementos, now felt like a prison, each object a painful reminder of the life I had envisioned, the future that had been so cruelly snatched away. Sunlight became my enemy, its harsh glare revealing the dust and grime that had accumulated in my absence, the physical manifestation of my own neglect. I drew the curtains, plunging the apartment into a perpetual twilight, a symbolic representation of the darkness that had consumed me. Even simple tasks, like showering or brushing my teeth, felt like monumental efforts, requiring a level of energy I simply didn't possess. I existed in a state of perpetual exhaustion, my body and mind drained by the relentless weight of grief and humiliation. I was a ghost of my former self, a shadow lurking in the corners of my own life. One evening, I found myself standing on my balcony, staring out at the city lights twinkling in the distance. They seemed so bright, so full of life, a stark contrast to the emptiness that had enveloped me. A chilling thought crossed my mind, a fleeting whisper of an escape from the pain. I quickly recoiled from the edge, horrified by the darkness that had momentarily taken hold. That was my rock bottom. That was the moment I knew I couldn't continue down this path, that I had to find a way to pull myself out of the abyss, or risk losing myself completely. I had to stop being a victim. The turning point was subtle, almost imperceptible, but it was there nonetheless. It started with small acts of self-care, forcing myself to take a shower, preparing a simple meal, opening the curtains to let in a sliver of sunlight. I began taking long walks in the park, letting the fresh air and the sounds of nature soothe my frayed nerves. I reconnected with old friends, people who had known me before Mark, people who reminded me of my own strength and resilience. I started reading again, losing myself in stories of triumph over adversity, of ordinary people overcoming extraordinary challenges. Slowly but surely, the fog began to lift, the darkness began to recede, and a flicker of hope began to ignite within my soul. It wasn't a sudden, dramatic transformation, but a gradual process of healing, of piecing myself back together, one small step at a time. I realized that I couldn't erase the pain, I couldn't undo what had happened, but I could choose how I responded to it. I could choose to be defined by my victimhood, or I could choose to rise above it, to emerge stronger and more resilient than ever before. The anger was still there, simmering beneath the surface, but it was no longer a destructive force, consuming me from within. Instead, it became a source of fuel, a catalyst for change, a driving force behind my newfound determination. My vision blurred. The glass in my hand shattered, tiny shards piercing my skin, drawing crimson droplets that mirrored the rage that burned within me. It was time to stop crying, time to stop feeling sorry for myself, and time to start planning. The shift from victim to planner wasn't a conscious decision, but a gradual evolution. As I began to heal, I started to analyze what had happened, to dissect the events leading up to the wedding day, searching for clues, for inconsistencies, for anything that could shed light on Mark's betrayal. I replayed conversations in my mind, scrutinizing his words, his tone, his body language. I reviewed text messages, emails, and social media posts, looking for patterns, for hidden meanings, for any indication that he had been leading a double life. I spoke to friends and acquaintances who had interacted with Mark, asking them about their impressions of him, probing for any insights they might have gleaned. The more I investigated, the more I realized that Mark's betrayal wasn't a sudden, impulsive act, but a carefully orchestrated plan, a calculated deception that had been unfolding for months, if not years. He had been lying to me, manipulating me, and using me for his own selfish purposes. The realization sent a fresh wave of anger washing over me, but this time it was a cold, focused anger, an anger that fueled my determination to seek justice. I began to research my options, exploring different avenues for holding Mark accountable for his actions. I consulted with a lawyer, who advised me on the legal ramifications of breaking off a wedding engagement, the potential for recovering financial losses, and the possibility of pursuing a civil suit for emotional distress. I considered going to the press, exposing Mark's betrayal to the world, but I ultimately decided against it, fearing that it would only perpetuate the cycle of shame and humiliation. Instead, I opted for a more strategic approach, a carefully calculated plan that would strike at Mark where it hurt the most: his reputation, his career, and his carefully constructed image of perfection. I smiled. I acted broken. But I was recording everything. I became a ghost in my own life, meticulously documenting everything. Every conversation, every interaction, every piece of evidence that could expose Mark's deceit. I upgraded the security system in my apartment, installing hidden cameras and audio recorders, transforming my home into a digital fortress. I even consulted with a private investigator, a former law enforcement officer named Ms. Walker. She was a no-nonsense woman with a sharp mind and an even sharper eye for detail. I laid out my suspicions, my evidence, and my plan, and she listened intently, her expression unreadable. When I finished, she simply nodded and said, "I'll help you." Ms. Walker became my silent partner, guiding me through the legal and ethical complexities of my investigation, ensuring that I didn't cross any lines that could jeopardize my case. She helped me gather additional evidence, track Mark's movements, and uncover his secret communications. The more we dug, the more we discovered, the more damning the evidence became. It turned out that Mark had been involved in a long-term affair with my best friend, Jessica. They had been secretly seeing each other for over a year, meeting in hotels, exchanging explicit messages, and plotting their future together. Jessica had even been helping Mark manage his finances, funneling money into a secret account that they planned to use to start a new life together. The betrayal cut deeper than I could have ever imagined. Not only had Mark broken my heart, but he had also shattered my trust in the people I loved most. The weight of it all was almost unbearable, but I refused to break. I channeled my anger and my pain into my plan, meticulously crafting a strategy that would expose Mark and Jessica's deceit and bring them to justice. It was a risky plan, fraught with potential pitfalls, but I was determined to see it through, no matter the cost. The hardest part was maintaining appearances, acting like everything was normal while secretly plotting my revenge. I had to attend social gatherings, interact with Mark and Jessica, and pretend that I was still their friend, all while knowing the truth about their betrayal. It was a constant test of my acting skills, a delicate dance between deception and exposure. There were moments when I almost cracked, when I wanted to scream the truth from the rooftops, but I knew that I had to stay strong, that I had to keep my emotions in check, or risk blowing my cover. I confided in my sister, Sarah. She became my confidant, my sounding board, and my source of emotional support. She helped me stay focused, reminding me of my goals and encouraging me to keep pushing forward, even when I felt like giving up. One evening, Mark called me, pretending to check in on me, feigning concern for my well-being. I played along, acting like I was still heartbroken, still struggling to cope with the breakup. He offered to meet for coffee, to talk things through, to offer me some closure. I hesitated for a moment, tempted to lash out at him, to reveal that I knew everything, but I caught myself just in time. I agreed to meet him, but on my terms. I chose a public place, a busy coffee shop, where I knew we would be surrounded by witnesses. I also made sure to wear a hidden microphone, recording every word of our conversation. During the meeting, Mark tried to manipulate me, to gaslight me, to convince me that he had done nothing wrong. He claimed that he had only broken off the wedding because he realized that we weren't right for each other, that he didn't want to lead me on. He even had the audacity to suggest that we could still be friends. I listened patiently, feigning interest in his pathetic excuses, all the while gathering evidence for my case. I smiled. I acted broken. But I was recording everything. As the wedding day approached, the tension escalated. Jessica, blissfully unaware of my knowledge of her deception, became increasingly involved in the planning process, offering unsolicited advice, suggesting changes, and generally trying to usurp my role as the bride. I tolerated her interference, knowing that it was only a matter of time before her true colors were revealed. I even played along, thanking her for her help, praising her taste, and pretending to value her opinions. It was a masterful performance, one that even I found hard to believe. One afternoon, Jessica came to my apartment, ostensibly to help me with some last-minute wedding preparations. As I stepped away to grab us some water, I watched her covertly rummage through my purse, checking my phone, looking for any evidence that I suspected her betrayal. The camera in my living room was documenting her every move. I returned, acting as though I had noticed nothing, and we continued our conversation, discussing the wedding flowers, the seating arrangements, and the honeymoon plans. As she was leaving, Jessica hugged me tightly, whispering in my ear, "I'm so happy for you, Hannah. You deserve all the happiness in the world." I smiled sweetly and replied, "Thank you, Jessica. That means so much to me." Inside, I was seething with anger, but I kept my emotions in check, knowing that the moment of truth was fast approaching. The exact day they tried to end me. I exposed the truth. The wedding was 3 days away when Ms. Walker called, her voice low and urgent. "Hannah, I think we found something." That something turned out to be Mark's meticulously crafted escape plan. It wasn't just about the secret account with Jessica, it was a complete relocation package. New identities, a house in another country, even new jobs already lined up. He was planning to vanish, to erase himself and Jessica from their current lives, leaving me with nothing but shattered dreams and a mountain of debt from the wedding preparations. The discovery hit me like a physical blow, stealing my breath and leaving me reeling. But beneath the pain, a cold fury ignited, a burning determination to turn his perfect plan into his ultimate nightmare. Their biggest weakness? They thought they were untouchable. I decided to use their arrogance against them. If they believed they were so clever, so far ahead of the game, then they wouldn't suspect a thing when I played right into their hands. I started dropping hints, subtle suggestions that I was considering eloping, running away to a tropical island to escape the pain and start a new life. I even booked a fake flight to the Maldives, leaving the itinerary lying around for Jessica to accidentally discover. I knew she would report back to Mark, feeding his ego and reinforcing his belief that he had outsmarted me. The trap was set. Now all I had to do was wait. The day before the wedding, Jessica called me, her voice dripping with false concern. "Hannah, are you okay? I heard you were thinking of leaving." I played the part of the heartbroken victim perfectly, confessing my doubts, my fears, and my desperation to escape the pain. I even sobbed a little, for added effect. Jessica listened patiently, offering empty platitudes and hollow assurances. Then, she made her move. "Why don't we meet for lunch tomorrow, before the ceremony?" she suggested. "Just the two of us. We can talk things through, clear the air." I knew this was it. This was their attempt to gauge my state of mind, to ensure that I wasn't planning anything that could disrupt their carefully laid plans. I agreed to the lunch, but I had a plan of my own. "That sounds lovely, Jessica," I said, my voice trembling slightly. "But let's meet somewhere private, somewhere we can really talk without being overheard." I suggested a secluded cabin in the woods, a place that Mark and I had once visited for a romantic getaway. It was isolated, remote, and completely off the grid. Perfect for what I had in mind. The morning of the wedding dawned bright and clear, a cruel irony that only fueled my anger. As I got ready, I felt a strange sense of calm wash over me, a quiet confidence that I was finally in control. I dressed in a simple white dress, a stark contrast to the elaborate gown that was hanging in my closet, a symbol of the life that would never be. I applied my makeup carefully, concealing the dark circles under my eyes, the telltale signs of sleepless nights spent plotting my revenge. I packed a small bag with the evidence I had gathered, the recordings, the documents, the photographs, everything that would expose Mark and Jessica's deceit. I checked my phone one last time, ensuring that the tracking app was active, that I could monitor their every move. Then, I headed out the door, ready to face my betrayers and deliver the justice they so richly deserved. The drive to the cabin was long and winding, the scenery blurring past me as I replayed the events of the past few months in my mind. The betrayal, the pain, the planning, the waiting. It had all led to this moment. As I pulled up to the cabin, I saw Jessica's car parked in the driveway. She was already there, waiting for me. I took a deep breath, steeled my nerves, and stepped out of the car. This was it. Time to finish what I had started. The air was thick with anticipation, the silence broken only by the chirping of birds and the rustling of leaves. I walked towards the cabin, my heart pounding in my chest, my hands trembling slightly. As I reached the door, I hesitated for a moment, savoring the last few seconds of anonymity, the last few seconds before the storm broke. Then, I reached out and turned the knob. Inside, Jessica was waiting for me, a smug smile on her face. But she wasn't alone. Standing beside her, his eyes filled with a mixture of triumph and arrogance, was Mark. "Surprise, Hannah," he said, his voice dripping with condescension. "Did you really think you could outsmart us?" But before I could respond, before I could unleash the carefully crafted plan I had spent months preparing, he said something that sent a chill down my spine, something that made me realize that I had underestimated them, that I had walked right into their trap. "You see, Hannah," he continued, his voice low and menacing, "we know about your little investigation. We know about the cameras, the recordings, everything." He paused, his eyes narrowing. "And we're not going to let you ruin our future." Then, he nodded to Jessica, and she reached into her purse, pulling out a small, silver pistol. The exact day they tried to end me. The sight of the pistol didn't scare me, it ignited something colder than fear. They thought they had me cornered, but they had just walked into my meticulously prepared stage. Before Mark could savor his triumph, I acted. I feigned a sob, dropping to my knees, the picture of a broken woman. "Please, Mark, don't do this," I wailed, my voice cracking perfectly. It was Oscar-worthy. As Jessica smirked, tightening her grip on the weapon, I subtly pressed the emergency button on the hidden panic device Ms. Walker had given me. It was disguised as a charm on my bracelet. Within moments, a silent alarm would alert the authorities to my location and trigger a pre-recorded message detailing everything: Mark's plan, Jessica's involvement, the whole sordid mess. While they were distracted by my pathetic display, I focused on my other advantage, their arrogance. They truly believed they were smarter than me. I used that against them. As Jessica moved closer, I suddenly lunged forward, not at her, but at the small table beside her. I swept it clean, sending a vase of water crashing to the floor, creating a momentary distraction. In that split second, I grabbed the fire extinguisher I had strategically placed nearby and unleashed a blinding cloud of white powder directly into their faces. Chaos erupted. Mark screamed, clutching at his eyes. Jessica coughed, dropping the pistol as she stumbled backward. I didn't waste a second. I grabbed the pistol, pointed it towards the ground, and emptied the magazine. Not at them. I was not going to let myself be at fault. The sound was deafening in the small cabin, adding to the pandemonium. Before they could recover, I snatched my bag and bolted out the door, running towards my car. I knew they would come after me, but I had a head start, and more importantly, I had the evidence. As I sped away, I saw them emerge from the cabin, faces contorted with rage and frustration. They were too late. The authorities were already on their way. I drove straight to the local police station, where Ms. Walker was waiting for me. I handed over the bag of evidence, recounted the events of the morning, and watched as the wheels of justice began to turn. It wasn't long before Mark and Jessica were apprehended, their dreams of a new life dissolving into the harsh reality of flashing lights and handcuffs. The fallout was swift and brutal. The news of Mark and Jessica's betrayal spread like wildfire, fueled by social media and the voracious appetite of the press. Mark's carefully constructed image of perfection shattered into a million pieces. His career was destroyed, his reputation ruined, and his family disowned him. Jessica fared no better. She was ostracized by her friends, fired from her job, and subjected to relentless online harassment. Their meticulously planned future evaporated, replaced by the cold, hard reality of legal battles, public shame, and the crushing weight of their own deceit. I watched it all unfold from a safe distance, a sense of grim satisfaction washing over me. They had tried to destroy me, to steal my life and my future, but they had failed. Miserably. The wedding was obviously called off. The venue cancelled, the caterers dismissed, the guests informed. It was a logistical nightmare, but I handled it with a quiet efficiency, determined not to let their actions define me. I focused on rebuilding my life, surrounding myself with supportive friends and family, and pursuing my passions with renewed vigor. I never spoke to Mark or Jessica again. I saw them once, during the preliminary hearing. Mark looked gaunt and defeated, his eyes filled with a mixture of anger and regret. Jessica avoided my gaze, her face pale and drawn. There was no remorse, no apology, only a lingering sense of entitlement, a belief that they had been wronged, that I was somehow to blame for their downfall. It was pathetic. In the end, they both faced serious consequences for their actions, including charges of conspiracy, fraud, and intent to cause serious injury. The justice system did its job. I moved on. I healed. I learned to trust again, cautiously, selectively, but with an open heart. Revenge isn't sweet. It's necessary. It's about reclaiming your power, about refusing to be a victim, about sending a clear message that betrayal has consequences. They lost everything. I just smiled. Would you have done the same? Let me know in the comments. Subscribe for more justice.